Millionaire lawyer's incredible mockery of cleaning lady revealed a surprising truth that change. The whir of the vacuum faded into the background as Rosa concentrated on the task before her, the polished marble reflecting her weary face back at her. Each stroke of her mop across the shining floors of the prestigious law firm felt heavier than the last. A quick glance at the modern high-rise towering over her reminded her of just how vast the social divide was, separating her from the unyielding power residing within. The attorneys, dressed in their expensive suits, exuded confidence derived from privilege. She wore her sacrifices like armor, navigating the world as a single mother working hard to support her 3 children. Today, however, her routine took an unexpected turn when the laughter broke through the polished veneer of that world. Amidst the faint conversations in the distance, she caught an outburst from Ethan, the millionaire lawyer known for his sharp tongue. He stood there, flanked by his elite colleagues, bursting into laughter as he riffed on the plight of cleaning ladies, her plight. A toxic blend of humiliation and anger surged through her, crumpling the composure she fought so hard to maintain. Unbeknownst to Ethan, her father had once stood among men like him, a respected lawyer who had turned his back on ambition in the face of economic ruin. Rosa's heart tightened at the familiar echo of her father's sacrifices. In that moment, the condescending laughter cut deeper than just amusement. It clawed at the very foundation of her identity. Rosa clenched her fists, promises of perseverance flame flickering in her mind. How dare he demean the hard work that put food on her table? Fear battled with a spark inside her, a flickering reminder of grandeur buried beneath years of duty and drudgery. The days following that moment turned into a smoldering fire of determination, propelling her to enroll in night classes, her sacred few hours of sleep now sacrificed for a chance at a different destiny. Her hands belonged to the broom, but her heart yearned for the courtroom. The challenge to reclaim what was lost called to her with each beat of her heart, the ghosts of disappointment and resentment, paving her path with dread. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But everything came to a head when tenant rights, a case Rosa held dear, landed on Ethan's desk. She watched from the shadows, his focus laser-sharp as he planned their strategy, his arrogance a veneer concealing a fragile man compensating for a deep insecurity. And amidst this whirlwind of high-stakes legal maneuvering, she found herself summoned to testify. A chill ran down her spine. Memories of humiliation churned within her. Standing at the threshold of the conference room, Rosa's heart raced as voices echoed, anxiety intertwining with hope. She met Ethan's incredulous gaze, an unexpected intensity swirling between them. This was her moment, bound to unravel the tightly wound tapestry of expectations, hers against his. It was as if she stood on the edge of transformation, a pivotal point that could shatter both her past and his carefully constructed beliefs. Rosa took a breath, one that tasted of freedom and fear. This confrontation was not just about her. It was about reclaiming a legacy long overshadowed by disdain. The tension in the room grew thick as they faced each other, two worlds colliding in a single charged moment. What would unfold would change everything. But it was unclear who would emerge victorious. Rosa inhaled deeply, steadying herself at the doorway to the conference room, where she had entered countless times as a cleaning lady, but never as a participant in the legal narratives entwined within those walls. The scent of polished wood and faint cologne mingled with the anticipation swirling around her, rendering the space somber yet electric. Every nerve in her body thrummed with fear and excitement. This was it. No turning back. Ethan lingered at the executive table, flipping through the case files, his trademark smirk absent in its place. Confusion clouded his brow. It was time for Rosa to take her stand, not just for the tenants, but for all the challenges she had faced. As the room turned to regard her, a heavy silence fell, every eye drilling into her with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. Half of her resisted the urge to shrink into herself, to retreat into the shadows, but the other half, the part ignited by that moment of ridicule, insisted she push forward. "Ms. Rosa," Ethan began, the official tone piercing through her steely resolve. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and focused her gaze on him. It was difficult to maintain eye contact, memories of laughter echoing back at her. But this was different. She was not just a cleaning lady, she was a sentinel, a vessel of truth for those who couldn't speak. "I assume you're familiar with the tenants' complaints," he continued, rifling through the papers like they were as inconsequential as dust on the floor. "What do you have to say about their allegations?" "Allegations?" she repeated, her voice breaking slightly despite her attempts to suppress it. "These are not just words on paper, Mr. Harris. These are people. Families suffering because of neglect and greed." She felt the burn of ire building within her, fueled by his previous mockery and the image of her children at home, studying late into the night, uncertain of their own futures. Ethan's brows knit together as he relaxed into his seat, perhaps evaluating if she was worth dismissing with the flick of a wrist. "You'll need to be more specific." Rosa sensed the subtle shift in power. She was no longer merely a witness. She was a force pushing against the wave of privilege that sought to silence her. She recounted every scene she had encountered, the peeling walls, the squalid bathrooms, the desperation in her neighbors' voices. Each word fell from her mouth like stones, crafting a wall of evidence woven from her own experiences, clear, visceral, and unyieldingly real. With each testimony, she claimed a piece of her dignity, reclaiming space she had long been denied. The looks of disbelief began to fade from Ethan's colleagues, replaced by an unsettling acknowledgement of her courage. She could see the realization dawning upon Ethan's face, the glimmers of recognition that perhaps he had underestimated her, perhaps he had fueled a fire he couldn't extinguish. Yet despite her victory in this moment, an unsettling seed of doubt buried itself in her mind. What if her words fell on deaf ears? What if this confrontation ended as they always had, with her slipping back to the shadows, unheard? Just as she finished, Ethan rose, the bravado clinging to his confidence feebly now. "You could have chosen any career," he said, a hint of mockery resurfacing. "Why cleaning?" A pang shot through her. She understood that this was his attack, trying to flip the narrative back on her. She'd anticipated that question, conflicted over whether to reveal her motivations or to keep them cloaked in secrecy. But as the room held its breath in anticipation, Rosa found her voice amidst her fears. "Because someone has to clean the mess you create. Someone has to hold you accountable." The tension in the air shifted, uncertain and taut. She didn't just confront Ethan, she faced the entire system designed to uphold people like him. The crowd buzzed around her, a sudden cacophony of unsettled murmurs. Ethan's gaze darkened as he deliberated. Was vulnerability a chink in his armor, or a chance to change the narrative? Rosa's heart raced. She had stepped firmly into the fray. This confrontation was not only hers to take, but also her children's future. She felt an unfamiliar sense of hope, shadowed by the fear of imminent backlash. Just as the room braced for the aftermath of her declaration, an unsettling realization held her breath captive. She was not only fighting back, she was challenging everything she had once accepted. The moment of reckoning had come, yet it was unclear if it would become her salvation or her unraveling. Rosa steadied her resolve, uncertain of the outcome, but resolute to withstand whatever storm brewed next. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, an unsettling silence begging for an answer that would shift the tides. The air felt charged with possibility and peril, her independence hanging delicately in the balance. What came next would either shatter the barriers or reinforce them. She held her breath, uncertain of the man who had once snickered at her struggle. Would he see her for who she had become? Or would he continue underestimating the force she had awakened? Rosa's heart pounded in her chest as she stared into Ethan's eyes, trying to gauge his next move. The silence seemed to stretch indefinitely, every moment swirling with potential consequences. If he dismissed her, it could erase the momentum she'd just gained. If he attacked, would she have the strength to withstand it? The conference room buzzed quietly, a rare moment of unity in their shared uncertainty. "Ms. Rosa," Ethan finally said, his voice smooth yet edged with condescension. "Your poetic prose about taking out the trash is entertaining, but this is not a debate stage. I want facts, not feelings." He leaned forward, fingers splayed on the table, a shield to hide his discomfort, or perhaps a spear meant to pierce her resolve. "Facts," Rosa echoed, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "The facts lie in the lives of those you turned away. Each family you ignored left a trail of despair. I've cleaned their homes. I've watched them struggle. Those are the facts." Her voice grew stronger with each assertion, gaining an underlying tone of authority that surprised even her. The edges of Ethan's confidence began to fray. For years he thrived on dismissive tactics, using relentless mockery as his shield. But today, Rosa was not the frightened woman who cleaned his office. The woman before him examined the room, tracing the faces of those who held power, who had the ability to turn words into change. She could feel her determination coalescing into a tangible force. Each word she uttered began to shape her budding identity, not only as a fighter for the tenants, but as an advocate for herself. This newfound clarity ignited something within her. Perhaps, she mused, she could learn to command the room, to turn her pain into purpose. "Let's have a reality check, shall we?" she continued, the icy edge of professionalism mingling with her fiery conviction. "For too long, individuals like you have overlooked those without a voice. But the reality is that the less fortunate are just as deserving of your attention as those wearing suits." She could see the subtle shifts in the room as the weight of her words sank in. Ethan recoiled, startled not only by the power of her voice, but by the shift in the air, the palpable sense that the balance of power was decidedly tipping. Her transformation was tangible, as if she exuded a new energy that challenged the status quo. In that moment, Rosa made a decision, to not only fight for the tenants, but to reclaim her own narrative. As she continued through her testimony, stories of neglected hallways and broken promises flowed with a newfound sense of ownership. Each personal detail felt like a spark, igniting hope not just in her own heart, but in those who listened. But with this surge of strength came the weight of realization. This confrontation represented more than her present. It was a critique of her past. The working-class struggles, the late nights spent wondering how to make it all work. It all rushed back to her, unbidden. Could she really rise above it? Was she ready to embrace this new identity she so desperately fought for? As she concluded her assertions, she encountered the unwavering gaze of one of the senior attorneys in the room, an older woman with graying hair who had witnessed the battle between privilege and perseverance for decades. Instead of the dismissive smirk of the others, the attorney nodded slowly, her expression a blend of respect and understanding. Rosa's pulse quickened. Was she finally being seen? The thought invigorated her, but also terrified her. The implications of being recognized came with expectations and risks. New resolve burst within her, demanding action beyond mere words. The confrontation was far from over, though the shift in energy hinted at progress. Ethan seemed rattled, a rare and vulnerable position for him, an opportunity for her to seize and carry forward. The room waited for his response, but more importantly, Rosa began to consider her own role moving forward. Would she continue to act within the confines set for her, or would she proceed into uncharted territory? The tension hung in the air, a palpable anticipation where possibilities folded into uncertainty. Rosa understood that crossing this bridge could lead to a transformative awakening, but it also held the risk of backlash that could send her spiraling back into obscurity. With her grounded footing in the moment, she clenched her fists and prepared for whatever came next. "Just remember, Rosa," Ethan's words slithered out as he straightened his tie. "This could all backfire. A cleaning lady should know her place." As his winged threat lingered ominously, Rosa felt a surge of defiance rise within her. What truly defined a person was not their title or their past, but their willingness to challenge the status quo. The next step remained uncertain, but the determination brewing inside her was undeniable. No longer just a pawn in someone else's game, she stood at the threshold of possibility. Would she embrace this moment to redefine her future, or would self-doubt wrestle her back into the shadows? The quiet hum of expectation filled the room as she gathered herself for the final confrontation that loomed ahead, the battle for her identity yet to unfold. Rosa's throat tightened, a mix of anticipation and fear settling in her chest as Ethan continued. "You may think you have the power to sway this discussion," he said, his tone dripping with derision. "But this is a business. Your stories are irrelevant to those who hold the purse strings." The words pierced through the buzzing anticipation in the room, and for a moment, silence reigned. Doubt flickered, a gnawing sensation twisting in her gut. What did she know about the world that had been built around profit and loss? But this wasn't just about facts. It was about a people's truth. It was about her truth. She inhaled deeply, channeling every ounce of her resolve. "Maybe you're right, Ethan," she began, her voice steadier than before. "But let's not forget that business doesn't exist in a vacuum. Every statistic has a human face. Every dollar saved is a life impacted." His eyes narrowed, disbelief mingling with the slightest hint of concern. This was new for him. She could see it. I spent years cleaning those homes. Homes filled with families hoping for just a chance. They don't speak in numbers. They speak in fear, loss, and sometimes hope. When you hear them, you hear their struggle. Can you truly disregard that? The attorney in the corner seemed engaged. A spark of interest ignited in her gaze. This moment felt monumental, a pivot point where something bigger than herself was happening. Rosa realized there was a flow to the discussion, a dance she could lead if she remained resolute. Your cynicism has limited you, she continued, eyes firmly fixed on Ethan. You may shield yourself behind statistics and comfort, but I am choosing to stand before you because I believe we can do better. Be better. When have you dared to step outside your bubble? The room shifted as the weight of her words entwined themselves around Ethan's defenses. He shuffled uncomfortably, and for an instant, there was uncertainty in his posture. I still doubt your intentions, Rosa, he shot back, attempting to reclaim control. Emotion doesn't win cases. Maybe so, she replied, adrenaline surging. But emotion can spark change, and change can win cases. Look at how the tide is turning in this room today. Or don't. Maybe you thrive on your narrow perspective. The senior attorney leaned in, listening intently now. This was Rosa's opportunity. The collective gaze in the room seemed to shift, not entirely supportive, not entirely hostile. It was a crossroads, a moment hung with endless potential. Could she see beyond this moment? What did it mean for her to stand there, not just as a voice for others but as an advocate for herself? A chance to disrupt a system that seemed impenetrable beckoned her. I've lived these stories, she asserted boldly, her heart pounding with urgency. It's time for voices like mine to be heard. I refuse to be erased because I don't hold a title. Ethan opened his mouth but paused, caught in the grip of something he hadn't encountered before, an assertion of identity. She could almost visualize the realization dawning. Rosa was no simple cleaner. She was a force, her lived experience a weapon he had underestimated. In my hands, these stories aren't just facts. They're power. I'm not asking you for acceptance. I'm demanding acknowledgement. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room, soft but growing more pronounced. Rosa felt the surge of her confidence spiraling upward as she stood her ground. It was disorienting and exhilarating. A sense of destiny swelled within her. But even as the energy in the room shifted, fear curled back into her gut. The stakes had escalated. Would she be prepared to handle the consequences if Ethan retaliated? Would he resort to tactics she hadn't foreseen? The moment hung in delicate balance, her heart racing with the need for a decision. Rosa leaned forward, the fire in her belly urging her to challenge him again. Let's redefine our roles in this conversation, shall we? I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. The real question is, are you ready to change? As the tension mounted, she could sense the anticipation in the room shift. She could almost feel the threshold between who she had been and who she was becoming. The turning point lay ahead, more than just a battle over words. It would echo in the very foundation of her identity moving forward. Just as the air charged with possibilities, Ethan's expression darkened. You'll regret this, Rosa. You have no idea the lengths to which I can go. Every ounce of fear she had been feeling turned into a steely resolve, even as his threat loomed large. This wasn't merely about external confrontation anymore. It was about a deeper, more profound struggle for self. As the room hung in suspense, the next choice emerged as critical. Would she choose to confront the dangers ahead, or would she retreat back into the shadows she had fought so hard to escape? The question loomed, sharper than ever. Rosa felt it pierce through the chaos surrounding her, signaling the relentless evolution of her fight for self-definition. Rosa's breath hitched as she stood at the precipice of a battle for both her identity and purpose. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, but they no longer stung. Instead, they crystallized her resolve. She was acutely aware that each moment she remained silent would chip away at her burgeoning power. The weightiness of his threat lingered, yet a newfound clarity layered over her fear. The fight ahead wouldn't merely be against him, it was against every doubt that had ever plagued her. As eyes shifted between her and Ethan, Rosa felt the dynamics of the room change. Where once she had seen disdain and skepticism, she now perceived something different: curiosity, perhaps even respect. She had stepped into the arena, and there was no turning back. "Ethan," she said, her tone calm yet unwavering, "you can attempt to intimidate me, but I refuse to swallow your threats without question. What I've experienced, what so many have experienced, must not remain hidden behind your walls of indifference. If that makes you nervous, good." Her confidence was palpable, each word reinforcing the truth that had ignited her passion. It was no longer a matter of defending her right to speak. It was a declaration of her existence. The hesitation that had once stifled her voice now erupted forth, unveiling the depth of her narrative. Ethan clenched his fists, the skepticism in his eyes narrowing further. "I'm not worried, Rosa. You lack the leverage needed to make demands." "Leverage?" she echoed, incredulous. "If you think holding power is only about dollars and cents, you've entirely missed the mark. My leverage is my experience. The stories I carry are worth more than your retorts. They are the very essence of humanity." Ethan shifted again, pulling his gaze away from her, seemingly calculating his next move. The lawyers in the room were shifting their postures, eyes darting between their lead and the fired-up challenger they had underestimated. Rosa had seen her community struggle, thrive, and sometimes falter. She knew what lay beneath the surface, the stories hidden among the trash and debris. With each second that ticked by, her conviction solidified. She would no longer be the voiceless cleaner. She would reshape the narrative. "What do you think will happen if you refuse to listen, Ethan?" she pressed, a fierceness fanning the flames in her chest. "We're at a turning point, and I have every reason to believe this truth will pierce through the callous barriers you erect." A brief silence enveloped the room. The tension was an electric current, and for a moment, she imagined the potential of what could happen if she just pushed forward one more time. What if this was not merely a moment of confrontation, but the start of a necessary reckoning? Finally, it was the senior attorney who spoke up, her voice steady and commanding. "Rosa raises valid points, Ethan. We can't afford to dismiss the narratives that drive this society. Perhaps we need to analyze what our decisions cost us beyond mere finances." The ground shifted under Ethan's feet, anger flaring in his eyes. "And you believe that we can win cases by appeasing emotions? This isn't a therapy session, Alice. We can't set legal precedents based on empathy. Yet empathy could guide better outcomes." Alice shot back, standing firm. "Don't you see? By acknowledging these stories, we not only serve the truth, but potentially create a more ethical practice. Isn't that worth pursuing?" Rosa felt something indefinable tugging at her. She wasn't the only one stepping into the light. It seemed others were reaching for it too. The concepts she had always perceived as sticky webs of conflict were morphing into tangible alliances, reforming the very fabric of their engagement. As tension danced in the air, Rosa shifted her gaze from Ethan to Alice, a flicker of hope igniting within her. What if this was the moment she not only rewrote her story, but inspired others to awaken the warrior within themselves? Yet still, trepidation lingered beneath the surface. Each triumphant beat of her heart carried the weight of uncertainty. How much further would Ethan push back? What consequences awaited her for summoning the flames of change? Conforming to his power was no longer an option, but the journey ahead promised a complicated terrain filled with numerous encounters that could either fortify her resolve or shake her foundations once more. Are you truly prepared to face the repercussions of what you dismiss as mere emotion, Ethan? Or will you allow yourself the vulnerability needed to embrace the truth we all know is there? The eyes of the room turned sharply to Ethan, who looked visibly shaken. Rosa sensed the intensity of the crossroads. She was on the cusp of redefining not just her future, but potentially reshaping the entire conversation. With every fiber of her being igniting with purpose, she stepped forward. And in that moment, Rosa understood a fundamental truth. She was no longer merely a pawn in someone else's game. She was the player, steering the course in a direction she chose. The stakes had never been higher, and as she locked eyes with Ethan, the next move hung delicately in the air. Would he fall back on threats, or was he ready to acknowledge the power of untold truths? The silence that followed held a promise of upheaval, and within that charged atmosphere, Rosa felt the weight of her own transformative journey, one that had only just begun. Rosa's pulse quickened as the intensity of the room became almost unbearable. She had unleashed a wave, and now Ethan was a ship tossed in tumultuous seas, desperately seeking solid ground. His jaw tightened, and for a fleeting moment, she saw doubt etch itself across his features before he masked it with practiced arrogance. "You think this is about you?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your experiences, your voice, they don't matter here. What influences outcomes are facts, not the tales of a cleaner. All you see are walls." She shot back, the fire in her chest flaring higher. "But I see windows, windows into lives that matter, lives you choose to ignore. My narrative isn't a distraction, it's the cornerstone of why we're here." There was a momentary flicker of acknowledgement in some of the lawyer's eyes, and Rosa seized it. This isn't merely her battle, it was burgeoning into an uprising of sorts, a slow but powerful metamorphosis that pulsed through the energy surrounding her. As Ethan fumbled for words, Rosa could feel her confidence sharpening. She had spent too many years in the shadows, refusing to accept the silent roles assigned to her. She thought of her mother, of the pride in her eyes when she had shared her dreams. Tonight, Rosa was standing up not just for herself, but for all the women who had worn similar shoes. "How can you not see it?" she pressed on. "Each story presents a truth that transcends the dry words of legal jargon. When we ignore the human aspect, we negate our entire purpose." Ethan scoffed, shaking his head as if to shake off her words like annoying flies. "You're romanticizing a profession built on logic. The law is a cold entity that demands dispassionate analysis." However, the initial shock within the room had begun to dissipate, replaced by a contemplative urgency. Alice exchanged a glance with another attorney, whispering something that dashed against the backdrop of Rosa's rallying spirit. "The law was designed to protect humanity, Ethan. We can't prioritize profits over people," Alice countered, firmer than ever. "This rigidity you cling to is a disservice to all of us in this room and beyond. Rosa is right about one thing. We need to step off this ledge of selective hearing and start listening to the raw realities." And there it was, a moment of potential alliance igniting and flickering like a candle, and Rosa felt herself drawn to it. Her ambition swelled with each word. A voice that had once been buried beneath the weight of others' expectations was finally finding its stride. Rosa's mind raced. What else could she say to elevate her argument, to solidify her newfound role in this conversation? The idea that she could affect real change hung in the air, paralyzing yet exhilarating. "Ethan," she began, her voice lowering to a concentrated whisper, "maybe it's time you ask yourself what the price of your arrogance is. To your career, to this firm, to the very ethos of the law itself." His facade crumbled slightly. She could see he was grappling with the unfamiliar pressure. Yet Rosa couldn't stop now. If anything, this juncture challenged her resolve to transform herself from a mere observer to an instrumental participant. "Imagine the impact we could create if we allowed vulnerability into our practice, if we used our legal might to amplify those voices that have been stifled," she articulated, her eyes sweeping the room as she spoke. She watched their expressions shift, gauging the fracture of doubt in Ethan's armor. Suddenly, she felt a strong surge of possibility coursing through her veins, tethered to the belief that now was the moment that could change everything. The barriers they had constructed could be dismantled, rebuilt with the truth as their foundation. What came next would depend on their response. But then again, would they rise with her, or retreat into old habits, clutching their power too tightly to let it go? "Are you willing to take that chance, Ethan? To confront the truths in this room? Or will you remain cloistered behind your walls of logic?" The flickering tension held the answer to her future, an inevitability that sent her heart racing even higher. She could sense it. Move forward, or slip back into the shadows once more. And as she waited for his response, a realization struck her. No matter what the outcome, she would never surrender her voice again. In that charged moment, Rosa felt an unexpected resolve take root within her, an internal transformation that opened the door to a future she had once only dreamed of, a future that could unfold beautifully or rapidly align against her in chaotic upheaval, depending on how this confrontation ended. Would Ethan rise to the challenge and acknowledge the power of her truth, or would he double down on his defenses, leaving Rosa to grapple with the consequences alone? Rosa held her breath, a fragile quiet engulfing the room as she anticipated Ethan's response. The weight of silence saturated the air, and time stretched as if the world itself had paused to hear his answer. She had taken a step beyond her previous limits, and though fear coiled around her insides, an ember of defiance burned brighter. "You talk about vulnerability," he began, struggling to mask the unease creeping into his tone. "But this is law, not therapy. We don't cater to sentiments. We analyze, dissect, and present our case." His attempt to regain control felt weak. A desperate grasp at authority that Rosa could sense was faltering. It buoyed her resolve. Each word that tumbled from him revealed cracks in his carefully constructed facade, and she was ready to pull on those threads. "Then let's analyze this," she shot back, her voice steadying with newfound assurance. "What are the facts, people, grounded in their realities, suffering from decisions made in this cold, dispassionate environment. Are we curating truth in a way that serves the law, or are we crafting a narrative that serves our egos? Because I have to believe that the law is more than that. Alice nodded in support, her presence at Rosa's side amplifying the shifts that pulsed throughout the room. The palpable atmosphere of reluctance began transforming into an undercurrent of curiosity. Rosa could feel the energy blossoming around her like a field of wildflowers, breaking through concrete, each lawyer beginning to unearth their connections to the lives they impacted. Ethan's features twisted in discomfort, a tapestry of anxiety and indignation. "Sentiments have no place here, Rosa. Trust me," he attempted, but his voice had lost its earlier bite. "Then you've got your trust misplaced," she replied defiantly. "The narratives we choose to deconstruct have powerful impacts on outcomes. Our job is not just to enforce the law, but to interpret it through the lens of humanity." Ethan's eyes narrowed, a predator cornered, and Rosa took a steadying breath. In this moment, she was not just fighting for herself. She was advocating for those whose voices echoed faintly, if at all. The realization crushed down on her, yet lifted her spirit. Vulnerability was not a weakness. It was a doorway to authenticity, and she had the right not just to knock, but to enter. The murmurs of the lawyers began to crescendo, igniting something inside her, a wave of collaboration that might spark the change she desperately yearned for. "Do you remember why you became a lawyer?" She directed her question not just to Ethan, but to the entire room. Was it for the accolades, or was it driven by a desire to effect change for those who could not seek justice on their own? Silence populated the front lines of Ethan's defenses, as confusion mingled with introspection across the faces before her. She sensed their awakening. Each moment where they hesitated, where they cast aside preconceived notions, propelled her momentum onward. "If we rob ourselves of empathy, then what kind of lawyers are we?" She pressed further, her voice rising. "What legacies are we crafting if we insist on seeing people as case files rather than individuals? This is our opportunity to redefine what success looks like. It's not just wins, it's the lasting impact of our choices." Ethan shifted his weight, the tides within him visibly turning. Rosa knew she was risking everything with each step she took closer to illuminated accountability. But she had to. She was at the final threshold of shedding someone else's narrative in exchange for her own. As she locked eyes with Ethan, she steeled herself for whatever came next. Would you rather win a case, or change a life? She let that question hang, laden with meaning. Around her, the room pulsed with the electricity of realization, bringing clarity to muddled thoughts. The space sighed, as several attorneys exchanged hesitant looks, and Ethan stared back at her, his own convictions shaken. Rosa's heart raced, not with fear, but with the intoxicating rush of anticipation. This was a pivotal moment, and whatever his answer would be could alter the course of not just her career, but the very foundation of their practice. Would they brave the storm she was creating together, or would they stick to the safety of the familiar? Uncertainty draped over her like fog, but she welcomed it. Today she had wielded her voice like a sword, and it had carved a new realm of possibility out of the rigid confines of their world. But the question soon looming was whether this nascent coalition would maintain its footing in the lingering chaos, or whether Ethan would manage to rally against the awakening tide. Would her ambition prove infectious, or would it be snuffed out under the weight of complacency? Rosa's gaze never wavered as the seconds stretched taut, the tension soaking into every corner of the room. Each attorney faced the crossroads she had laid bare, and she could feel their collective heartbeat, an electric thrum of uncertainty and hope. Would they lean into this pivotal moment, or recoil into the security of the status quo? Ethan was her main focus. The rigidity etched into his demeanor was fuzzily shifting. She could sense a crack forming. His brow furrowed, and something shifted in his cerulean eyes, perhaps a flicker of reflection, or maybe the slightest hint of defeat. But alongside that, uncertainty brewed indignation, a cocktail of resentment that could easily be stirred into defensiveness. "Changing lives is not our job, Rosa," he finally replied, his voice betraying an uncharacteristic tremor. "We are here to defend the law. That's the essence of what we do." "No," she countered, drawing from the well of conviction that burned steadily inside her. "We defend people under the law. Our profession shouldn't be reduced to cold strategy. Our advocacy should be rooted in understanding the human experience. The law must serve humanity, not the other way around." As Rosa spoke, an unexpected vulnerability unfurled in her, fraught with passion, revealing layers of her own fraught journey. Had she not eviscerated her self-doubt in the face of adversity already? The early mornings, the late nights, pushing through reassurances that her voice, too, deserved space in the dialogue. Alice leaned slightly closer, the supportive energy radiating from her friend almost palpable. It was clear to Rosa they shared a vision of redefining their roles, not as mere participants in a legal dance, but as ardent advocates for change. The quiet murmurs from the crowd built into a swell, and Rosa felt her momentum shift as attorneys began to nod, their trappings of decorum momentarily breached. Was this the moment to press harder? Every instinct screamed to navigate with discernment, but the tides had turned, and she had a choice to make. "Ethan, I'm not asking you to abandon the law, but to enrich its application," she continued, a gentle fire igniting in her tone. "What if we chose to be architects of empathy in our craft? Imagine the influence we could wield, crafting narratives that not only inform, but liberate." For a fleeting moment, Ethan appeared to wrestle with her insight. Rosa recognized this as an opportunity, a sliver of time where egos could be reshaped or confounded. She closed the distance, both physically and metaphorically, seeking common ground in the heart of his shadows. "Remember that case in which we defended the family of that wrongfully accused man?" she probed. "Their faces, hope intermingled with disbelief when we stood in front of that jury. That's what I'm fighting for, Ethan. Their lives are not mere statistics. They are stories that deserve our deepest empathy." He faltered, lips pressing tightly together, digesting her words with a mix of bemusement and intrigue. This was her spark, a strategically shared memory fueled with emotional weight. As the air hummed in anticipation, Rosa sensed something formidable unfurling within her. Grit and tenacity bridged her thoughts. Clarity crystallized. Wasn't it time she laid bare another facet of her abilities? Advocacy, stifled by her previous fears, rose to embrace her anew. But then, just as the atmosphere began to solidify around a new understanding, Ethan's posture shifted again. The flicker of hope she noticed was instantly entwined with a shield of skepticism. "And what if your humanity collides with the realities of winning?" he challenged, his tone now tinged with a veiled reluctance. "What's the cost of this idealism? Are you willing to risk losing everything for a belief that might lead to failure?" The internal questions he posed struck Rosa. What was the true cost of her ambitions? Would her desire for a compassionate practice put everything she'd worked for on the line? As she wrestled with the answer, a lingering weight settled in her chest, something she hadn't anticipated pushing against. What had she truly been willing to stake? "Are you prepared, Rosa?" She heard her own internal voice question, underscoring the gravity of the crossroads before her. Feeling a myriad of emotions binding and breaking within, she faced him head-on. This was no longer just about challenging the status quo for others. It had spiraled into an existential moment for her. She would need to answer not just for the profession, but for herself. What would she claim as her truth when the dust settled? The stakes had surged without her consent, and she would either stake her claim or watch everything slip away. "Because this is it, Ethan. It's time to choose." The moment echoed, reverberating in the silence that followed. Would he stand by her side and embrace this evolution, or would they remain ensnared in a world where legal prowess outweighed empathetic ambition? An uncertain resolve twisted in her. Either way, the confrontation had only begun, and Rosa was primed for whatever came next. The hum of the room faded into a low murmur, and Rosa clung to the fragile thread of resolve as she awaited Ethan's response. The world around her blurred slightly. All that mattered was the man positioned before her, their ideological battleground laid bare. His skepticism coiled in the air, almost palpable, and Rosa's heart raced against the encroaching tide of doubt. What if he chose to walk away? That thought revitalized her conviction. She couldn't let fear dictate her path, even if it meant risking everything she had built. Taking a steadying breath, she summoned a newfound audacity. "Ethan," she urged, her voice steady. "This isn't just about winning. It's about the lives we affect, the dignity we uphold. We have the chance to be more than lawyers. We can become advocates, catalysts for real change." With each word, Rosa felt her own belief solidify. She had fought battles in the shadows, wielding her aspirations like armor, and now she had to stand firm. If she spoke from a place of authentic vulnerability, could he not be inspired? But his reticence stubbornly lingered. "And what guarantee do we have that empathy will lead to victory?" Ethan pressed, his blue eyes sharp with guarded intensity. In a courtroom, emotions can be a liability. The law is not a playground for idealism. Her stomach tightened at his words, but a deeper resolve settled within. She remembered nights spent poring over case files, the heart-wrenching stories behind statistics that could never encapsulate human suffering. "Isn't it our obligation to balance the scales?" she countered. "For every cold fact must rest the weight of the truth behind it. We can't be so tangled in precedent that we forget the people we're sworn to protect." Ethan shifted, and for a fleeting moment, an echo of her passion registered in his expression. Did she catch it? The slightest crack in his stoic demeanor? Determined not to lose the moment, Rosa pressed on. "What about the family left behind by an innocent man?" she continued, her voice rising with fervor. "What is the cost to their future, to their faith in justice? Isn't it worth challenging the status quo if it saves them? If it offers hope? If it restores humanity to a process often devoid of it?" She paused, allowing her words to echo in the charged silence, hoping the gravity would resonate deep within Ethan. She had transformed from doubt into conviction, and perhaps he could too. But doubt crept back into her mind. What if he remained steadfast in his beliefs? She saw Ethan's jaw clench, grappling with the weight of her narrative entangled with his professional identity. It was a terrifying assertion, the two blurred lines of idealism and reality threatening to collide. Against the backdrop of flickering fluorescent lights, the room felt unbearably intimate, as if the very walls were filtering their charged exchange. The emotions hung thick, suffusing Rosa with both trepidation and resolve. She had fought too long, navigated too many battles to only back down now. Then, in an impulsive wave of conviction that surprised even her, Rosa took a step forward, bridging the gap between them. "What's the point of winning if we're losing our souls in the process? We must be the change we wish to see, not just lawyers, but advocates for those who feel unseen." For a tense moment, silence reigned as the weight of her challenge settled like an invisible blanket over the room. She felt the intensity of all eyes pivot towards Ethan, as if daring him to respond, to choose. Then, with a slow, calculated release of breath, he replied, "Maybe you're right, Rosa. But igniting that change requires more than courage. It requires a willingness to confront not only the laws, but ourselves." His admission pulled at a thread of vulnerability within her. It signaled that perhaps he was willing to explore beyond the surface. But it also raised new questions in her chest. How deeply did that willingness run? Could he let go of the confines of his own conditioning? Rosa's heart raced at the thought that this was no longer just a confrontation. This was a collaboration that could change everything, and now rested on a pivot. "Then let's confront it together," she said softly, a new determination blossoming within her. "Let's find out what lies beyond theory. Let's redefine not just how we practice law, but who we can become." Could she guide Ethan to that edge? As the room watched in palpable anticipation, she felt the stakes rise. Whatever trust they built here could radically alter their professional journeys, and perhaps even their lives. "Together," Ethan echoed thoughtfully, staring deeply into her eyes. The response was a beacon, but the path ahead remained suffused with uncertainty. The challenge would not just be about changing their roles, it would delve deep into their very core. Would they witness an awakening, or would the shadows consume them both? Rosa's heart thundered as a new layer of tension enveloped them, brimming with possibility and peril. The reckoning was upon them, and with every passing moment, she understood their fateful choice was not far off. What would emerge from this crucible of transformation? Rosa stood in the conference room, the charged atmosphere crystallizing around her as she faced Ethan, not just as a defendant in a legal battle, but as a collaborator in a pivotal moment of growth. The weight of their previous confrontations lay heavy on her shoulders, yet she felt lighter, more buoyant in the power of her voice. "Together," Ethan repeated, his gaze steady but uncertain. It was a moment shared, a breath of recognition that they were now two individuals standing on the precipice of meaningful change. The gravity of their collaborative potential hung thick in the air, daring them to leap into the unknown. Rosa dared to hope that the stigma of their past encounters could transform into something foundational. What if we became a model for how legal practices can respond to the human experience? We don't need to strip the law of its rigor. Rather, we can fill it with compassion and empathy, she proposed, her voice steady with conviction. With every sentence, Rosa deliberately stepped away from her insecurities, her past, and the sting of laughter that had once taunted her. This was her moment to claim agency, not only for herself, but also for the lives of those she represented. Ethan shifted in his seat, absorbing the gravity of her words. "You're pushing me out of my comfort zone, Rosa," he replied slowly, his expression shifting as he grappled with the tension between his ingrained practices and the new possibilities Rosa was presenting. "But maybe that's precisely what we need." Encouraged, Rosa pressed on. "Every case we take on has ramifications that extend beyond the courtroom. By considering not just the legal details but the human context, we elevate the practice, to be not only advocates for legality, but warriors for justice." She could see the glimmer of understanding reflected back at her, each beat of their conversation softening the walls that had once defined their relationship. This was no mere negotiation. It was an awakening. Rosa's heart surged as a realization washed over her. She wasn't just fighting to redefine Ethan's perception of her, but to ignite a passion for progressive change within him, a change that transcended their individual ambitions. Together, they could draw forth an alliance that challenged the very nature of their profession. "I want my children to see a brighter future," she declared, her voice unwavering. "I want them to believe in a world where justice is not an abstract concept, but a living, breathing reality." Ethan seemed to wrestle with her words, internalizing their weight. "Then let's compile the data that supports a more compassionate approach," he suggested tentatively, a small but significant olive branch of progress. "Let's strategize on how we can integrate these values into our cases." A flood of energy infused Rosa, a sense of exhilarating purpose as her dream began to crystallize. "Yes, we can start with community outreach, collaborating with advocacy groups to help amplify the voices of those struggling for justice," she urged passionately. Together, they laid the groundwork for a paradigm shift, crafting a mission that bridged meticulous legal strategies with the emotional fabric binding their clients. As Rosa outlined ideas around practical applications, her nerves faded. The realization struck her. She was not simply reclaiming her identity as a legal voice, but actively shaping a legacy. Finally, as their strategy discussions began to settle, and the day transitioned into the evening, a quiet camaraderie settled between them. Rosa looked directly at Ethan and said with determination, "We will be remembered for this, and it will make all the difference." His response was a nod of agreement, and for the first time, there was no disdain in his eyes, only respect. Rosa left the conference room that day with tangible plans and a renewed sense of purpose. She had not just confronted a single individual, she had ignited a profound transformation within herself, and perhaps within Ethan as well. Months later, as the firm implemented new values emphasizing compassion in legal advocacy, the impact of that moment lingered in her heart. Rosa had transitioned from the shadows of a cleaning lady into a respected advocate, a force in the legal community. The culmination of her journey proved remarkable. She was invited to speak at legal forums, her voice now a respected beacon championing for more humane laws. She found herself mentoring new law students, compelling them to value the emotional weight alongside cold facts. Her children watched her with pride, witnessing firsthand the power of resilience and transformation. Rosa had not only conquered internal doubts, she had reclaimed her narrative and reshaped her life outside the grasp of ridicule. As the sun set on another skilled negotiation session, she stood firm, comfortable in her skin, confident in the woman she had become. She had embraced her truth and demonstrated that in challenging landscapes, perseverance led to transformation. This was it. She had achieved both her personal and professional aspirations, and the journey had marked her for life. Thus, she had achieved not only her worth, but had also laid the foundation for generations to come. This was Rosa's legacy, a testament to unwavering resolve and the courage to transcend the labels imposed by society. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.